Welcome to the Relocated South African, the show for navigating immigration from South Africa for a better future. Check out our website, www.therelocatedsouthaafrican.com, and also subscribe on your favorite platform. Today's episode is about money, but not in the way that you might expect. It's really about what happens when you leave to South Africa and you have to rebuild a sense of security, confidence, and stability in a new country. My guest from Toronto is Vincent Heys, the founder of WealthStack. And like many of us, his journey started in South Africa before relocating and figuring things out from scratch somewhere else. Welcome, Vincent.
Yeah, nice to meet you again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for being here. But we, before we started, we just had a quick powwow about weather. So just tell us, what's the temperature in Toronto right now?
It's they always kind of quote two numbers. The one is what the temperature is, and the other one is what is with the wind chill. So it's -11, and with the wind chill is -18, which it kind of, you know what, I think it's a bit like people that does the Ironman. You know, you can never imagine anyone swimming that far until you kind of get to it. And the same kind of thing with the weather. You know, you would never think that, how can I survive at -20? But it's doable.
It's doable. Yeah, that's right. Everybody says it's just the wrong clothing. You just have to have the right clothing and you can survive. So
there we go.
But I guess from where we are in Portugal, I'm going to stop complaining immediately about the winter.
It's all about perspective, huh?
all that winter's doing to me is it forces me to cancel golf every now and then. But other than that, it's not so bad. Anyway, Vincent, I always ask my guests just to give us a bit of background. Where did you grow up, go to school, study, and how did you get to move to Canada?
Jan, I grew up on a farm just outside Bloem. And went to a school in Bloem, probably the best school south of the Limpopo. You probably know which one that is, but well, so let's rather just leave it there. Yeah. But anyways, no, I grew up in Bloem. Dad was always a farmer. My mom, very good farmer. My mom was a small businesswoman. Actually, the small businesswoman of the year in 1990 or 1989.
Wow.
That's our claim to fame in that kind of space. She had a factory on the farm and making bed linen for back then Edgar's up in Pretoria and Joburg. And she was actually one of the first few people that actually imported material from China or Taiwan back then. That's really, really interesting.
Oh, that is really interesting.
So that's anyway where I got into kind of farming and business, helping my parents, entrepreneurs on the farm. You know,
So that settles the entrepreneurial spirit, I would imagine.
Yes. But anyway, so finished Bloem and then started actuarial science. Bloemfontein didn't have it at the time, it's Koffsie, so I had to go to Tikkies, got a bursary from Sanlam. Spent a few years in Tikkies, very good place. And then went overseas for a year, 95. One of the first people that did the working holiday stints in the UK. Spent some time in the UK, did a school of ministry in British Columbia in Canada, and then we went to Hong Kong. So it was a brilliant year. Flew around the country as well, around the world, just after university. Went back to South Africa, started working for Sanlam, got married, and then Cara and myself, we moved to England for a couple of years. And it was on the second summer of our stay there. I think it was in 2000, actually. So the whole summer was one weekend long. And so I said to Karen, no, this is not going to work. We waited the whole winter and we got one weekend of summer. So we decided to move back to South Africa. And so 2001, we moved back to South Africa and lived in Cape Town until we moved to Canada.
Okay. And you moved to Canada exactly when?
We moved in 2017.
Okay.
But it took us a good 10 years to get, We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. Just a question. Did you go to res at Tukkies?
Yes, I did. After schooling, I said to the people at Tukkies, I want to have the most unknown race, and so they put me into Relocated.
I was in Taibo, so
Taibo's just
we
next
know
door. Yeah,
all of
yeah.
ours, like it's our neighbors. Yeah. Oh my
Yeah,
word,
exactly. Okay, good.
that's amazing.
Mm-mm.
And you worked in the actuarial department at Sanlam when you were there.
Yeah, so we in '96 I started at Sanlam. Started working back the bursary. Yeah, I worked in finance and then the medical, pension funds and then medical. The old Sun, what was it called again? Was the old Sanlam Health plans.
And Vincent, sorry, do you guys have kids?
You know, we've got 3 kids. Eldest Jonathan, he is 22. Then a middle son. He went to university this year, and then our daughter, that's still in high school.
Okay,
But
so they,
so all 3 immigrated with us, obviously.
yeah, all born in South Africa and gone to school there partly, and then immigrated. That's always, uh, a whole debate. I don't know. You may have seen this. I had an interview with a filmmaker in America, a South African guy from Stellenbosch, Desmond Denton, who made this movie called The Journey Home, about the immigration to America and kids, how they adapt and so on. It's really interesting. So I think we sometimes underestimate, we think they're very adaptable, and they are, but we sometimes underestimate giving up friends and missing friends and family and things like that for the
Definitely.
kids. Yeah.
I mean, I can see with our 3 kids, the eldest was 13 when we moved overseas. The middle 10 and the youngest was 6 or 7, so the eldest, he probably had the most difficult time because he was like in that teenage years and moving into high school. And it probably took him a good 4 years, to get settled. Yeah.
Okay.
Where it's very different for my daughter. But then again, she doesn't have that many friends and relationships in South Africa anymore.
Yeah.
So when we go back and visit South Africa, she doesn't really have a lot of connections again,
Okay.
whereas the eldest one has more connections. So it kind of goes maybe both ways. You get the disadvantages of leaving when they're a little bit older, but they still have connections in South Africa and vice versa, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I mean, a thread that runs through every discussion I have on this podcast is family, and the sacrifices that parents sometimes have to make, and it's different in every person's case, because some parents can travel and still young enough to visit, and others can't, and it's quite a this is not for sissies. So, but we'll get to that. So, if you have to say, I mean, having been overseas, worked overseas, and so on, what was the primary driver to make you leave South Africa? You obviously have great qualifications, and you still have a great business in South Africa.
Yeah, and I think personally for us it was more like a pull as opposed to a push, from that kind of perspective. And I think it's maybe partly also being in Cape Town. It's such a beautiful place, and not many people actually leave Cape Town. If I just think about all the South Africans that I know in Oakville, here in Toronto, then I would say most 90%, 95% are from Gauteng, and maybe 5% from Cape Town. So obviously, I think people's reasons are different if they're in Gauteng just because of safety. It used to be that. I'm not sure if that's still the biggest driver why people leave Gauteng. But I think Cape Town is different, because it's such a beautiful place. It's fairly safe. And so for us, it was more of a pull. I was here in 95 when I did that overseas trip. My brother moved here in early 2000s. He's a medical doctor. Maybe my mom planted the seed. I can remember being on the farm in the early 80s, like in the midst of the riots and apartheid. And my mom kind of just said to us, listen, just go and study something you can take overseas, you know. And so that's why we all went into professions that you can easily transport cross-border. So I think for us, it was more like a pull, more of like an excitement to go overseas and try something and do something, as opposed to a push. But it was Canada as opposed to Australia.
Okay,
because we had family in Canada, but we did joke with my brother the other day and said, why did you move to Canada? It's we could have been in the nice sunny Australia.
Okay.
But
I mean, people are really happy in Canada. I've spoken to numerous people in Canada. So yeah, absolutely. A big question that comes up in every conversation also is this husband and wife being on the same page. And it sounds to me like in your case it was, because, especially in the early days, I find that people sometimes battle. The husband's up and the wife's down, and they have to support each other because they haven't really ingrained themselves into a community. So in your case, you guys were absolutely on the same page.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's so crucial that is in place. Yeah, I mean, if it's not, then the problem is just going to compound, I think.
Absolutely. I think one of the guests on my show, a psychologist, once said, don't think that moving overseas will mend a broken relationship. It's just going to make it worse.
No, unfortunately not. Unfortunately not, yeah.
So in a previous conversation, when we met the first time, you mentioned that yours was a long decision-making process. That's also, for me, really interesting because, in our case, we said, let's sell the house. The house sold within 6 weeks. Whoops, now what now? So let's go, okay. But in yours, it sounds like it was a much more involved and a long process. Will you tell us a story?
Jan, yes. No, it was... it was in 2007. It was a month before I joined Ian de Lange at Seed Investments and started Seed Investments in 2007. We put our application in for Canada, and then I guess we kind of hoped that it's going to come through within 2 or 3 years. Our permanent residence in Canada and move over here. 2008 financial crisis happened, and basically they kind of shut down immigration. We got a letter, I don't know, it must have been 2009, 2010, saying, listen, if you still want to be in the queue, stay in the queue, or you can have your 10,000 Rand back. That's how much it cost us to get permanent residence. We basically said, well, let's stay in the queue. I mean, there's nothing to lose, and we're just going to see what's going to happen. 2012, we started another company, Seed Analytics. And so when the immigration thing started coming through in 2013, 2014, we kind of said, listen, we need to get these companies in a very good place before we, or in the best place that we can before we move. And so that's why we continuously kind of stopped the process. If they gave us 5 months to send stuff in, we send it in the last 2 weeks, just to postpone the process as long as possible. Because we kind of knew that if we want to start something in Canada, we had to make sure that we were able to run a successful business in South Africa first, where you know the industry, where you know the environment. And so your footing had to be strong. For us, it had to be strong in South Africa to know that we have the confidence to start something, because obviously to do something in a new country, that's a different ballgame. And so we wanted to see those companies into a good place. And that's always difficult, even back then. Moving, it was difficult. Leaving those companies behind, leaving the people behind, and move overseas.
But the decision to take the business overseas is more about diversification. Is it about earning money in a strong currency, or kind of what drove that? If you had a successful business in South Africa.
Yeah, I think, business obviously goes through different stages. There was opportunity for us back then to see whether we can start something cross-border, to open something up here. But we see it with big companies as well, where Some companies focused in Southern Africa first, like Sanlam, for example, and then they branched out. Whereas Old Mutual went overseas right from the back, and so they had two different strategies. One worked and one didn't work. And so I think sometimes you are opportunistic because you do think that things are always better, across the water, which you have to find out once you're there. It's never
Absolutely.
given,
Yeah, absolutely. That's
So you
very
kind of
true.
have to take risks sometimes, but I guess a calculated risk in terms of
Yeah.
what you want to do.
And you have mentioned, and hopefully we'll get to it when we talk about the advisory business. What role did faith play in this decision to leave South Africa? Because that's sometimes becomes a kind of an emotional debate. The whole faith thing: should you not? How did you guys find that?
Yeah, no, I think for us, we were really, very fortunate with the community that we were involved in South Africa, and um, I'll explain a little bit more in terms of how we made the decision. But kind of looking back, I think my wife a bit more, but I have really kind of only questioned whether we had to come to Canada maybe half a day of the last
Okay.
9 years, So I think, so because of the process we went through, I think it gave us a lot of, not confidence, but just, it was the right thing to do,
Mm, mm,
So the way that we kind of did it through our faith journey was we involved our mentors in South Africa um, to help us decide. We had our friends and our family, and basically, it's obvious we prayed a lot about the stuff, and we took all those kind of things to our mentors, and basically said to them and to our parents, listen, this is what we kind of feel like we need to do. We've got a real push that we feel God is moving us to Canada, but if any of you think it's not the right thing to do, we won't do it.
mm, mm.
And so, I mean, some of our mentors that are very involved in community work in South Africa, very involved in uplifting different communities, they were all in favor for us to go, which was really interesting.
Okay.
And so I think if we tried to do this like 10 years before, in let's say 2007, some of them would have said, I think you should stay. There's still some work to be done in South Africa. But as it been in 2017, it was all anonymous from all the people that we engaged in terms of we think it's the right thing to do.
Mm.
But I think that we really like that kind of decision making, in community with other people.
Yeah.
Because
No,
I can very easily convince Cara and my wife, listen, we need to do this thing or we need to buy that kind of thing. But if I articulate it with two or three other people, then it becomes not that obvious.
No, I totally agree with you. And, you know, especially even any move out of South Africa is far. You'd unless you go to Mauritius, but people move, across continents and so on. So it's a big decision and it impacts a lot of people. And I think that's, I've often asked the question whether it is selfish to move overseas for, not selfish for you, selfish, you do it for your children or whatever, but it's kind of in a way selfish to parents who are grandparents who may not see their kids that often, and I experience it myself. But yeah, I think it's great that you were able to go through a really strong process because I think once you have that kind of agreement and it's the right thing, then it's easier not to look over your shoulder. As you say, you questioned it for half a day. And I mean, that comes up so many times as well, is that people go back and it takes a lot of time, it messes up. Paul Harris said in an interview, it takes 5 years out of your life if it doesn't work, so it's a big decision.
Yeah. So
Eh,
sorry, Jan, I think what it makes it easier is if you have a mission that you go for, as, I mean, obviously I've got complete empathy with people that were in difficult situations from a from a security and violence perspective.
Sure.
So obviously, family safety is first. You need to look after your family and so on. So let's just kind of park that kind of thought. But on top of that, I think it just makes it a lot easier if you do have a mission. And obviously, if you have family, so we've got family in Canada, we have family in South Africa, and a lot of good friends in South Africa, but just having some other family here also helps with that thing of, oh, I'm not missing out. Like if you December, not in South Africa, you kind of feel like, oh, I'm missing out all the other family I see around the Christmas, table.
Yeah.
So I think for us, it was easy because we have family here. And the process helped us, and we didn't have to leave South Africa because of safety. So
Yeah. I think those
and
are.
it becomes very difficult for other people though.
Yeah, and you can never say it's so hard to judge, because you can't put yourself in
No.
somebody else's shoes. And some people are so badly affected. I've had people who said, they've had these invasions and they'll never go back. Doesn't matter how hard it is,
Yeah.
and they're suffering and they just
Yeah.
won't go back. So
Yeah.
I hear you. It's very interesting. So let's get to life in Canada. What's life like, and how difficult was it to adapt?
I think Paul is out by 2 years. He says 5, I think 7.
Good.
No, but to, I think, I mean, you've seen it, John. I think moving cross border, it's like getting your first child. Trouble is coming. You just don't know how much.
That's a good way of looking at it. That's very true. Yeah.
So, and the second thing is, even if you had a midlife crisis, you're going to get it again.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, obviously, I would wish I would want people to have a soft landing. For people that move across border. Most people don't, unfortunately, and I've seen it with clients that we work with, and for ourselves as well. It took us a good 7 years to kind of readjust, reset and reset and reset a few times, and kind of just know that it's different. It's difficult to say to people. It's like saying to someone that's going to get a child, listen, it's going to be different. The person's going to say, yes, it's going to be different. But they don't know how different it is. And everyone's experience is also different. But I think you need to kind of, for us, it took us 7 years to really settle in.
I think also it's also got to do with expectation. I think when you go overseas and you think you're going to recreate little Cape Town, it ain't going to happen. That just doesn't happen. People find I talk about medical and schooling and things like that, but you arrive here and everything's different. There's no discovery here. We all love discovery, but there's no discovery here. So now you have to kind of find your way, and you have to find people that you can trust to help you and tell you what's right and what's good and so on. So it's a real process. I've often said it that some of my friends said when things really get bad, then they're going to leave. They've got lots of money and so on. I say it's not that easy. Money doesn't buy you comfort overseas when you don't have an address, when you don't have a bank account, when you don't have nothing. You've got to start over. So it's tough. And in terms of things like schooling and medical services, how have you guys found that?
So maybe just before I get to that, I think Canada is, or North America is obviously very different, to the UK, New Zealand, Australia, where most people go to, or even Europe, because everything is bigger, everything is more extreme from a weather perspective, and the sports are different. So obviously, I mean, we play a lot of tennis, my wife and I. So we we watched all the tennis, so that's quite accessible for us. There's more tournaments to go and watch and play and these kind of things. But from other sports, we've never really got into hockey. So you don't say ice hockey, just hockey. You never got into that. Obviously, baseball is big. The Toronto team did very well this year. The NFL is big. And so we kind of start getting more involved in watching those kind of sports. Just because, cricket is not available here. I mean, immigrants do play, but it's not really available. We watch rugby a lot. Medication is very different, so it kind of, in the first 6 months, it kind of hits you just how different it is compared to the UK. When we moved to England, it was very similar. You drive on the same side of the road. Most of the road signs are the same. Banking is the same. Investments are mostly the same. So there's a lot of commonality between Commonwealth countries. Canada is also Commonwealth, but it's obviously more aligned with the States. Very different from a setup, the way they do sports, the way that they schooling, 3-4 months of summer holidays. University here is 8 months long. Most kids work during the summer, earn income for the next year. And so the whole kind of setup is very different from that perspective. I would for schools and medical, we've put our kids in private schools, but I would say it's more like a Kiro type of private school in South Africa. It's not your high-end private schools. And the reason for that is we just wanted to buy the worldview, so we don't agree with the worldview that's in the public school. And so we kind of just went for the private schools. And so, fortunately for us, we have the money available to have done that. But I would say public schools and even medical care here is, if you compare it to South Africa, I always use the analogy that as South Africans coming from South Africa to Canada, all of us were on a medical fund, in medical aid with Discovery or Sanlam or whoever. And so we were in the top 5% or top 10% of the country, and we kind of experienced that level of care. So that level of care and that level of schooling that we had, let's say with Grey College or Bishops or any other Model C schools in South Africa.
Model C schools, yeah.
Those are like UK grammar schools, really good. And you can't compare that to a public school here, where the worst and the best public schools are very close to each other.
Okay.
Whereas if you go in South Africa, the best schools are up here and the worst schools are here. And so what we normally do is people that come from South Africa, we compare the best schools in South Africa that we use to the public schools, which are mostly average from that perspective. And then we say the public schools are not good here, which is actually not the case. Okay. They are very good. It depends on who we compare that to.
Yeah.
And so the same goes probably for healthcare. Everything is public healthcare. Much, much better than public healthcare in South Africa. Worse than private healthcare in South Africa. Okay. But I would say if, and I think it's the same in the UK as well. Okay, they have a dual system there, public and private. We only have mostly public healthcare here. To get into the system is difficult, but once you're really sick and you're in the system, then it runs. Then it's like top quality healthcare. But what I do recommend, advise private clients that I deal with, is to have enough emergency fund available that if something hits, is to buy a ticket, go to South Africa or to the States and get the medical, because you're going to wait too long. You know what I'm saying?
Too long. Yeah.
So anything that you're going to wait too long, maybe you just want to finance yourself because you don't pay any medical insurance, as you would do in South Africa.
Yeah.
So it depends on who you compare it to. But so there's always pros and cons of any place. The good system here is like it covers all the people.
Yeah, I'm with you. Cool. Let's just before we get to your business, you mentioned going back to South Africa. Do you guys go back regularly? Is that part of your deal with the family?
Yeah, we don't have a deal with the family, but we go every second year.
Okay. 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 Yeah. I mean that's and your parents, have they been across to see you guys?
Yes, except my dad, but everyone else, no, yeah, comes every second year or every year. So we see each other actually pretty often, uh, but at the minimum every second year.
Okay, that's
But
cool.
it is a long trek, it's 2 flights. But I have a client that lives up north in BC, so he had to fly when he flew back from December. He had to fly from Cape Town, Schiphol in Amsterdam, Calgary, Vancouver, and then from Vancouver to his last destination. So that's a long trek.
I must say,
You don't want to do that,
and the
Toronto, it's
older
2 flights.
the older I get, the less I want to be in airports. And this is now the time when you can travel, but I find that I get really irritated waiting and sitting. And
No, that's true.
anyway, but it's necessary to do. Anyway, let's just turn a little bit to the business, to your business, WealthStack. Was 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 that born out of your own experience with immigration, or not? How did it come about?
Yeah, I was reflecting on the question when I saw that when you mailed it to me. I think um, it was kind of born in South Africa, but I don't think I would have done it there.
Okay,
We
well, yeah. Maybe we should just quickly
yeah.
give a brief background of what the business does, because I think it's really interesting.
So the premise for WealthStack is to solve a solution for the end client and for the financial advisor. So the problem case with the end client is that they would go to a financial advisor to get advice. And most of the time, the financial advisor is not the appointed advisor for all the products. So most people have worked for a corporation or for a few companies before. And so they will have multiple preservation funds, for example, or an existing pension fund. They may also have group benefits from the company. At the same time, they might have private insurance and then also private investments through retirement annuities or RRSPs in Canada, or tax-free savings accounts. And so what normally happens is that the client has these multiple different products, but not a single place to kind of get to tie them in and to understand why they have a product in the first place. And so we bringing peace, I would say peace to clients, because once you put everything into one place and you know why you have those products and how those products speak into a specific financial goal, once you bring clarity to people, the normal feedback, Jan, is that, okay, there's now peace in the family. I might be a long way away from reaching that goal, but at least I know where I'm at now, and I have a good sense in terms of what I need to do, to be able to get there.
Mm.
So for the end client is to bring it into one place, articulate the goals well, because we know that 36%, you'll increase your probability of reaching your goals if you write it down. So we need to be able to articulate those goals for clients well. And so we give it's basically for the end client, it's a place to log in and to be able to see the dashboard. And then for the financial advisor, it's scalability. I often listen to this podcast from Guy Rauch, where he talks about, always interviews entrepreneurs. And so what is always interesting to listen to those stories is that, for example, a lady would come up and say, she has a business of making really good cookies, for example, and selling it in so many different stores. And so the thing is always, it's easy to make 12 really tasteful cookies, but it's a very different ballgame to make 12,000 really tasteful cookies.
Exactly.
And so that's the premise here is the WealthStack for the financial advisors. It's easy to give advice for 12 families very well, but it becomes complicated to give the same quality of advice and the same service for 100 or 200 families.
I understand.
Okay. So that's the thing in terms of scalability for the financial advisor to give that level of service to all the families and to make sure we know what are the goals again, what are the aspirations, what are their products, where are their products, even the stuff I don't manage.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. I think, especially when you immigrate, and you get involved in a new environment and you're sitting with investments in different jurisdictions and you have different issues. And I think you mentioned a will. I think that you put that on the site as well, in the vault or whatever you call it. And that's critical because, in our case, we have a will in Portugal, but I have an investment annuities in South Africa, so I have to have a will there as well, And sometimes they're done by different people and they're in different locations. So I can see the benefit. There's huge advantage in having that. Do you think that when people immigrate from South Africa, that financial planning is not done properly? In general, maybe not in your case, but just a general question. What is your sense?
Jan, I think it doesn't matter how well you're prepared, you're always going to make mistakes. Obviously, you want to make as few mistakes as possible. So I would say that most people that I get in contact with are, and obviously it's biased because people that contact me are people that want advice. I don't know about the ones that don't want advice.
Mm-hmm.
But I get the sense if I look at those clients, South Africans versus local Canadians, I would say South Africans that knock on the door are more prone to getting advice, and they're used to having good advice. And that I think it kind of speaks into the quality of financial advisors and financial system that we have in South Africa. I often say to financial advisors in South Africa, don't by any stretch of the imagination think that the stuff that we do in South Africa is second class, or not second quality. It's either the same or better, the financial system that we have in South Africa compared to overseas. You've been at RMB, look at RMB, for example, look at the hedge funds that we have in South Africa, the investment platforms. You're always going to, the financial advisors, the system is on par and better than, on par with Canada and Australia, for example. So the whole financial industry, I think, in South Africa is very well set up. And I kind of get that feedback, from clients when I get here, how they complain about the Canadian banks, complain about the Canadian insurance companies and investment accounts and these kind of things, just because they're so used to that quality product providers in South Africa. I think where it becomes murky for clients sometimes is to understand the whole concept about financial migration and tax immigration. So obviously financial migration doesn't exist anymore, but and tax immigration is actually pretty simple if you think about it. It's not South African invented; it's global. And so I think very often people get jammed up in terms of not understanding the tax consequences from a tax immigration perspective. And that's maybe a place where sometimes, you have some South Africans that kind of put their head in the sand and, I'm not going back to South Africa. I'm never going to go back. I don't have to deal with my tax returns in South Africa. No, you have to. Whether you decide to go back or not, if you don't tell them that you left, you're still a tax resident. So I think those are the kind of things that, so maybe that's a place that people need to maybe give more attention to. And then I guess the second one is just how the existing products in South Africa kind of fit into the total plan globally. Because even if you tax immigrate, it doesn't mean that you have to cash in all your insurance policies and investment accounts and all those kind of things.
Yeah, but I mean, you touched on tax, for instance, and insurance and so on. Do you actually advise on that, or are you purely just providing the platform?
So we have two offerings. So one is a B2B offering where we sell the platform to other financial advisors to help them. But in Canada, we have a B2C offering. So here in Canada, we do speak to private clients. And again, mostly South Africans, or then employees of group retirement funds that we service, and that will be Canadians. But on the private client side, mostly South Africans that we have.
Yeah, because my sense is, there's problem is that people sometimes talk to a South African advisor about investing offshore, and they're not always best qualified. Depends who they work with, and there's lots of fees, and it gets sometimes quite expensive. So that's a big thing, and moving money abroad, that seems to be the other thing. Given the exchange control, people get caught in those processes as well, and dealing with sometimes, I guess, with people that are, honest but not fanatical, and that also has an impact on, because every penny counts, because that was the other question I asked you in terms of. I wanted to ask in terms of people immigrating. You talked about the insurance policies and the tax and so on, but what about people just cashing in everything and shipping their money and trying to start afresh? How would you advise somebody like that? Because that seems to be, not everybody is really wealthy when they immigrate. So people have to cash in their pensions and whatever they have to move across. And then it's important where they put that money and what they do with it.
Yes, yeah, we've got a lot of empathy for people that's moving. Because we know that, you take your South African rand and you divide it by 8 or 9 or 10 or 12, whatever, where you're moving to. And so those rands become small numbers in the other currency. What I normally say to clients is not to make a decision too quickly. You normally have time to stop a policy or to withdraw an investment when you move overseas. I'm not sure about people that's moving to other countries like, let's say, Portugal or Australia, but when you move to Canada, you've basically got a year, 1 year before it becomes part of your tax filing. So if you move to Canada, you've got a year to cash in your preservation fund in South Africa to bring it over here without being a part of your income tax return. Okay. Obviously, you're going to pay tax in South Africa and so on, but it won't form part of your tax return here. Now, in the UK, I think they've passed other legislation in when was that? 6th of April last year, that made it possible for people to move money into the UK without tax for the next 5 years or something. So there's a big tax advantage on their side. But I would say the first thing is not to be too hasty in terms of cashing things in. Maybe make some of those decisions before the first year of leaving. And then the second thing is making sure that there's enough cash in the bank, close. So you don't want to struggle getting money shipped out of South Africa into your offshore bank account, and you have to pay for rent 12 months in advance, for example, or buy a car in cash because you can't get a loan from the bank for $10,000, for example. Silly things like that, just to make sure that there's peace at home. So we always wanted to make sure, whether it is people with a lot of money or people with not so much when they move, is the premise is, let's make sure there's peace at home, and the best place is to have cash available to buy those kind of things.
Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
that is critical, is to make sure, because when you're battling financially and you're battling to get settled, it really gets difficult.
Yeah.
Vincent, let's just quickly, while we're talking about the business, you mentioned to me about the advisory business that you're involved in, or the group in the US, or in Canada and US. Do you want to quickly just touch on that, the Christian advisory?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, in South Africa, when I was giving advice in seed investments for private clients, we specifically kind of said that we don't want to mention to people that we're Christians, because there was sometimes like a funny connotation to that. You know, if you say you're Christian, then like why do you say it? You know, so we always went from the premise just to lift the values in terms of what we do and how we do business and so on. I got exposed to an organization that's in the US and then also in Canada, and they also have a chapter in South Africa actually now, called Kingdom Advisors or Kingdom Financial Advisors. So that includes financial advisors, but also accountants, because they both deal with families with finance. And it's really to help understand from a biblical perspective, you know, how do we need to advise clients with their money. But again, you know, those kind of things most of them are things that your grandfather would have told you around the kitchen table. You know, common sense, which is not so common sense anymore. Yeah. So we actively bring it more into our practice with private clients. You know, when we think it's important to bring it up. But those things, Jan, is like, it's very simple and straightforward, common sense kind of things. You know, like avoid debt, for example. You know, as far as possible, because debt always mortgages the future. Pay tax with a smile, because that's indication that it's going well. You know, save for the long term, build emergency fund. You know, make sure that we give money away, because that breaks the power of money over us. And enjoy what's left, you know, in the family. So it's just like really good principles, and that we actively bring into the practice. And so the main premise for that again is to bring peace, you know, just to kind of see how we can do that for families. And something simple as, you know, a mortgage. If we have to take out a mortgage, let's not aim for a 25-year mortgage, but let's aim for a 50-year mortgage, because it's going to be a lot less interest we're going to pay for that. But there's some great stuff, you know. I think the thing is, we always have to learn, you know, we always have to move forward and learn new things. And, you know, I've been also in the industry for a while, but it's always fun to learn new things, you know.
Absolutely.
It's like what you do with the podcast. I mean, who would you thought you would do this like 10 years ago? Probably not. You know?
Not even just over a year ago, I wouldn't have thought of that.
So I mean, it's amazing. And how many programs have you run now?
Well, I think this is probably episode 53 that we're recording.
Exactly.
Now, so.
Yeah, look at that.
So it's crazy.
Yeah, it's
you know, as you say, it's just about learning and doing new things and meeting people. And ultimately, you know, for me, this is about adding value. If I help one person, I would feel that I've achieved something. So
and I think the community needs to thank you for putting up this show, you know, because it's like what I say number 54, and what someone else shares in number 5. Maybe there's something in there for the people that listen to it, you know, because you're always going to make errors if you move overseas, you know, and it's exciting. You know, there's a lot of opportunities and all these kind of things. But as long as they can learn one or two things and make fewer errors in the way.
Absolutely. I was going to say, that's a good point you made there. Is there something, thinking back over since 2017 maybe, and in the decision-making process, is there something you think you would have done differently knowing what you know today?
Sure. That's maybe not to take you that seriously, you know, and maybe laugh at yourself. Yeah, my my daughter often comes to me and says, "How did you embarrass yourself today?"
Yeah, that's true.
It's like I think I'm 5 days behind. I embarrassed myself 5 days ago. But I think that for me would have been helpful is not to take myself too serious.
I think, yeah, I think that's very valuable. I think we do take it, and we just not to treat every little stop in the road as a disaster, and
Yeah.
accept that there's going to be red tape, and accept that there's going to be people that are difficult to deal with. But we move on, and what I find, just living in a country where you don't even speak the language, just uh, people in Portugal are just incredibly friendly. We just come across just
Very
this
good.
afternoon. We went for lunch, and my wife tried to explain to the guy that she wanted a salmon kind of rare. So he goes, "Go salmon." So that's exactly
Quick.
how she wanted it. And we all laugh because he doesn't speak great English and we don't speak Portuguese. Yeah, it's I think it's embracing, just there's so
Yes.
many new things and different things. I think I often say, if I think back of my days in Stellenbosch and my friends that are there, and we're the same age, I just think in the last almost 6 years, I've lived, man. This has been an
Mm,
experience. And I think that
mm,
that's invaluable. You can't put a value to it.
mm.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and maybe a final thought there is you learn, you see other people from different cultures.
yeah.
We've got great friends from Canadians. We've got very good friends from South Africa. We've got friends from Pakistan, from India. You know, it's just, and those people enrich you.
Mm,
From the US. So, I mean, things that they tell us stuff from Pakistan that I've never known. Because you sit with blinders, you think this is how people are. But when you start to know people, it's like, man, these are so great people.
mm, mm.
There's all
Absolutely.
that flavor that it brings to the discussion, the relationships.
Yeah. Couple questions left. What do you miss most about South Africa living in Canada?
Family, friends, and biltong.
Okay. Not car guards. I have to ask that question because I don't miss them. Biltong, biltong, but most countries, most I'm sure in Toronto with a lot of South Africans, there's decent biltong.
Yeah, no, I make my own, but it's always
Okay.
nicer to buy it.
No, it's very true. We all love our biltong. It's interesting. I always ask this question as well. Just in in that movie about immigration to America, one guy made the comment that he feels more South African living outside South Africa than when he was living in South Africa. Why would you think that is?
I think, I don't know. I think maybe most of us want to go back to your roots at some point.
Mm.
My son never
Yeah.
played rugby in South Africa, but when he moved here, he started playing rugby
Okay.
because he missed the culture, I think.
Uh, yeah, I think maybe there's so much stuff on the go that here we're just South African. We're not. We don't belong to a
Exactly. Yeah.
political party, and as long as the Springboks keep winning, it's easy to feel South African.
Yeah.
So yeah, excellent. And last question: what would your advice be to a young Vincent thinking about immigrating? What would you say to him?
I would say just do it quickly. Go and explore. Um, and yeah, just go for it. You think if you're in South Africa that moving even to Canada or let's say Portugal, it feels such a long way away. And it is a long way.
Mm.
But it's more the unknown.
Yep.
And then you find yourself a year or two in the journey that home is actually a new home, you know, which is actually a phenomenal kind of thing. For us landing in Pearson Airport, that's home. It's not Cape Town anymore. It's just a weird thing, and that didn't take us. It didn't take us 7 years. It took us like a year or two. Yeah.
It is so true. I said exactly the same. We were in Budapest for New Year, and when we got home, landed in Lisbon, I said to my wife exactly the same thing. This feels like home. It's crazy, but this is home now, and it's yeah. You've got to just embrace it and do it. Awesome. So maybe just we'll put it in the show notes as well. But where can listeners get hold of you? What's the best place?
Yeah, and maybe the best place is just to go to wealthstack.ca. Details are on the email address, phone number, etc.
And it's Wealth, WealthStack.ca for
That's
Canada.
Right. Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much, Vincent. It was great to hear about your move and the business and everything. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking, and thank you again from the whole community for what you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vincent. I appreciate it. As always, thank you for listening and for supporting the Relocated South African. If you want to interact, send me an email on jan@relocatedSouthAfrican.com or check out our website, therelocatedSouthAfrican.com. Until next time.